An interesting thing in Professor Masri's statement was the fact that he admitted they were poles apart ideologically, yet they could debate and respect each other. And he was most impressed by Walter Rodney's culture in these debates, because he had never met a Marxist or someone claiming to be a Marxist of that temperament in public contention and discussion. And he felt that this person was of a quality that what they call the so-called third world needed very badly. And he appealed to them not to let this gentleman become another exile somewhere in the so-called metropolis. I think that was very significant because it is not the person they are portraying to be, they are portraying him to be. Some of this bile also came from Jamaica, because our intelligence persons here, as you can see in the records, when Walter Rodney was banned in 1968, and I did come to this in another way so as not to waste your time, and that is by referring to an interview taken by Mr. Carl Blackman, editor, with Dr. Walter Rodney in 1980. Now that Walter Rodney would never have been asked by a government newspaper for an interview, not under the sun, unless it was politically required for the purposes of those who govern the country. First question: you know that because you were a troublemaker in Tanzania and other places is the reason why you did not get the job? First question. Dr. Rodney conducted that interview in a very calm manner, answering questions, very logical, in spite of this affront. The argument in that interview, the questioner, it was all about you're a troublemaker. You applied for this job, you couldn't get it because we make trouble in Tanzania, we make trouble in Jamaica. And weren't you supporting violence in Jamaica? You know that there was violence in Jamaica after you were prohibited. Dr. Rodney's answer was not to defend himself from the charge of violence, because, as I commented, he was not in Jamaica. What took place in Jamaica was a response of the masses of Kingston or wherever they came from. Had nothing to do with Walter Rodney's presence or wishes. But his remark was that the JLP had somehow begun to implement some of the very things they had been saying in those grassroots movements with which he has been associated, out of which roundings with my brothers came. So there we are, there was this kind of, I don't know what to call, I hope the commissioners will find a name for it, this kind of anticipation of hostility, demonstrated by your own hostility. Walter Rodney was not charged in Tanzania, he was not charged in Jamaica for anything that I know about. It declared that he was asked to leave Tanzania. His reply was very well ordered. He said there was no such thing. But this is the kind of climate they wanted to set us against. Someone who would distinguish himself as a young man, as a scholar, as a student, gone abroad, wanting to come back home to help in development, because we see education as development, a very essential part of development. But I think I have made that point clear, and if there's anything I omitted, I hope the council will remind me of it and lead me towards it. I've touched the previous hostility, I've touched this very significant newspaper article which came in February of 1980, and he's going to be liquidated in June of 1980. So far as I'm concerned, the scene is being set. A scene is being set. Here is a man, danger, public danger in several countries, coming back home to make trouble. And if anything happens to him, you can fill in the rest, fill in the blanks. Nobody's business, nobody's fault. The second place I think I wish to go is now to get away from the preliminaries. I hope that is full enough. And please ask me for details if I have disappointed you there.
Could you say to us, please, Mr. COI, who did you feel was setting the scene to paint Dr. Rodney as a troublemaker?
Oh, the ruling party, people in government, and in particular the leaders of that party, the head of it. You know, let me come now to the question of paramountcy, because it's important to understand how the ruling party of those days worked. And I'm talking of the PNC of the 1970s and later. I'm not talking of anybody currently, conducting politics in Guyana. And I'm also saying that all of this arose out of ethnic insecurity, competition, battle for the right to rule, and political bankruptcy. The failure of people in countries like this to think out their own solutions, oral solutions from Eastern Europe and Western Europe, and all over the world except from the resources of their own people. So we find parties behaving in this way. Oh yes, the other thing I want to touch on before I go to the crime scene of June 13th is the right to life. In preparing this statement, I thought of bringing to the notice of the commissioners, the fact that there is no real respect for the right to life. Lawyers understand this very well, and people specializing in human rights understand it very well, and it is something that we talk about. But when we examine the actual process of government and administration and police responses, we find that there is no practical recognition of the right to life. Even before Dr. Rodney, in 1975, a minister, the Honorable Vincent Tika, who had been a member of the People's Progressive Party, a high flyer in the People's Progressive Party, and had crossed the floor over to the PNC about that time, I think along with others. He was also one of the favored leaders of the People's National Congress. Suddenly one night he was killed, October 25, 1975. To this day, there has been no suspect. This is in Greater Georgetown, a minister of the government, killed at night with gunfire through his hip or somewhere, in the company of a visiting woman dentist, whose name was mentioned sometime earlier. suspect arrested. Just as the suspect, Gregory Smith, was spirited out of the jurisdiction, the only witness to this crime was about to leave the jurisdiction within a matter of 24 or 36 hours. And no one knows if she was asked to make a statement. So, commissioners and counsel, you can get an impression of the quality of the right to life. And it's not confined to any one of these so-called leading parties. The right to life is a very low end. Suspects are shot. They call extrajudicial killings, and no one cares. No one cares. You see, there is an attitude. I'm saying this, and I'm not trying to abuse anybody. There's an attitude among the middle strata towards criminals, so-called criminals and suspects. And I think the whole, and this refers to whether it's Indo-Guyanese, Indian-Guyanese middle class, or African-Guyanese middle class. Suspects are expendable. Expendable. I remember well, in the 70s, they used to be bumped off one after the other. And it still goes on. There's a change of government, but not a change of culture. It still goes on. And all of the, well, we're not talking about now, so don't let me go there. But this was also one of the issues of those days. The first connection I had with one of these cases was the killing of a young boy called Keith Caesar in Georgetown. Shot, breaking into some, basically daytime, breaking into some place to steal something for, hunger or I don't know what, but he's shot by the police. Nothing was, we did an investigation in this organization, went around, asked people about this situation, this boy, went to his grandmother, went to the church, because he belonged to the church choir. And we made a lot of investigations. He was not known as a criminal, but he was crawling through some kind of manhole or boyhole or something, and he was shot. That was the first engagement I had with that kind of thing. So, the right to life, Vincent Tika, not comrade mine or anything like that. But the amazing thing is that 1 month after the incident, and I found this in a document I myself had written for the Working People's Alliance, and it is dated September 13, 1980. I found a note there that within a month of Tika's death, the cabinet decided that the investigation was closed. And I must have got this from the public media, which was government controlled. No.
Mr. COI, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you had started to speak about paramountcy,
yes,
and then we went on to the right to life. Could you actually develop that idea, please?
Yes. I just wanted to put in a question of the right to life, because my whole point in this inquiry is, if a finger can't be put on anything, the regime of the time has failed miserably in observing human rights, and in particular the right to life. Because something connected with that is investigation of crime, especially a fatal crime. And none of that was done either in the days of Tika or in the days of Walter Rodney, on the days of Ronald Model, none of that, zero. So, paramountcy. December.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, can I just have a moment to just catch up on my notes on this part of the witness evidence?
I think it might be more useful not to interrupt him at this time.
Okay, fair enough.
Not to question, but to let him continue. Or did I misunderstand you, so you were trying to catch up with your door?
Yeah, I just wanted to finish off my notes on this part of the evidence.
How long do you think it would take to do that?
I'm done.
You're finished?
Yes.
Okay. Please proceed then.
Please direct me where I didn't understand the exchange.
You're about to tell us about
Am
paramountcy.
I to continue?
Continue. Please continue.
This is a doctrine that appears in the Declaration of Sophia. The Declaration of Sophia is a People's National Congress document. And I discovered recently a study I did about it in 1976. And what I said was that for the People's National Congress, it was a welcome step. They were putting ideas on paper and making some sense of politics. Whether you agree with the sense or not is another matter. Some of it was very forward-looking, but the paramountcy that I'm going to talk about coming out of this document was not. It had also something very interesting, which was a code of conduct for leaders, for which this organization, ASPRI, had been fighting for years previous. Now, paramountcy is a declaration that the People's National Congress, the party, is paramount to the state, which is one of its executive arms. The state is an arm of the party. This is what we are being told. Now, Mr. Burnham did not dream this up. This came from other jurisdictions. Now, in Eastern Europe in that time, and I'm not speaking as, I'm not an anti-communist person by any means, if you will see anything of the history of this witness. But they developed a kind of system there, as C.N.R. James was always pointed out, journaling, where everything is sealed, sealed from top to bottom and closed, and it's the party that governs. And that is what happened in Eastern Europe. Everything is under the leadership of the party, and that is what it means. And the form it took here was paramountcy of the party. It means that we had echoes of it about 3 years ago when the head of the Presidential Secretariat was kind enough to explain to the country that they have something called democratic centralism, which means that you hand down orders, and whatever the higher organs decide are binding. In this case, what the party decides is binding on the state. That is what it means. It is not expressed in any part of the Constitution, old or new. It was expressed physically through a combination of the Ministry of National Development and the Office of the General Secretary. And this was on the signboard, Office of the General Secretary, People's National Congress, and Ministry of National Development. It was on the stationery, and it appeared in several places. It was quite an open option. Now, with my own curiosity, I began to look behind it to see, okay, it seems as if the party and the state are one in this particular ministry. How do the finances work? And I waited for the annual estimates of 1975, because in 1974, There was no paramount. He estimates of 1975, Ministry of National Development. You look at any other ministry, you see the various items, the public service, what you call the establishment, various other things, and then other charges in detail, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or whatever, with notes behind. When I went to the Ministry of National Development, there was this item, other charges, $10 million, no details. And I felt this was a clue. When the Declaration of Sophia said that paramountcy will be executed through the General Secretary and a number of executive secretaries. But when you look in the annual estimates, you see the Minister of National Development who doubles as National Secretary, General Secretary, and that is okay. Have to come from somewhere. But no executive secretaries. All the charges $10 million. To find these executive secretaries listed in an official document, I went to the telephone directory, and there they were. There they were. All several of them. There's a lot of telephone lines and staff and that kind of thing. So that is the structure of paramountcy of the party. And it simply means that despite what the electorate does, it is the party that rules, not in the ordinary sense. In fact, we went quite beyond that. Well, perhaps I should not go there because this is internal People's National Congress business. I've discussed what is offensive in relation to the public interest. The way this party could dominate the state through the General Secretary, these executive secretaries who are carrying out the functions of the party. And this charge of other charges, $10 million. And the document I wrote, which I've shared with Council, there is more evidence of how money was spent in that period. I think that is enough for parliamentary. There. I want to go now, please, to the crime scene. And then I will ask your permission to stop and take further reading from my statement, because I have not exhausted this. It's 20 pages, and I have respect for your patience too. The crime scene. When we heard about this crime, I had seen Walter Rodney on the afternoon leaving the center, not the center, but the party office in Queen and Hood Street. It's in the depressed part of Georgetown they used to call Tidy Up Day. And he said he was going to pick up his daughter, I think from St. Rose's.
What date was this big piece, Mr. COI?
I beg your pardon?
What date? What date are you referring to?
13th of June 1980. 13th of June 1980. Yeah, so, I am not a Georgetown person, I'm a rural person. And every evening, whatever I'm doing, I go home to teach. Even if I have to come back to what they would call main truck at public meetings or anything like that, I go home to teach and return. So he was leaving before I went home to teach. And he said there was something at his daughter's school, and that was the last I saw of him. The last I saw. When we heard this, I got the news from Dr. Rupert Guggenheim and someone else, waking me up at Buxton that same night with this terrible news. came down to Georgia and began to try to understand what was happening. I saw nothing of the people Donald Rodney had called up. But in the days and weeks after, as soon as things cooled down, we began to go around, I and a couple of others, at a prison block, Camp Street Jail, because I knew that at least for about a year before, I don't remember for what reason, but they had posted 4 armed guards at the 4 corners of the prison block. 4 armed guards. They had also a mobile police station in Bent Street. We went around and started to investigate after this bombing took place and Dr. Walter Rodney was killed. We spoke to residents, we spoke to shops in the area about police presence. The upshot of it was that the guards had been removed. I think on the day before or the Wednesday before the fatal incident. I feel that this is something to note because the whole propaganda of the government is that Rodney was going to bomb the jail. If somebody is going to bomb the jail and they see an armed guard at the corner, 2 corners, they try not, they won't be going there. So I think to encourage this proposed bombing, the guards were removed. That is my conclusion, why the guards were removed. The mobile police station also was removed, but the people were not, some people differed whether it was the night before or the morning after the mobile police station had been removed. But they agreed that there were 2 police cars parked on the north of the prison in that street. I have to make an admission about that document. There's a flaw in the information of that document that I wrote in 1980. I don't know what you make of it, but I wrote there that according to Gregory Smith's instructions, Walter Rodney was to come out of the car and walk along John Street. And this is my own self-delusion. When I read Donald Rodney's statement only recently, well, I am not changing what is in that document written in September 1980. I'm just pointing out that it's an error. And it is false, but it's not intentionally false. All the time they were talking about is walking along the street. I'm thinking of John Street. You see, to the west side of the prison, there is Camp Street. And on the eastern side of the prison, there is John Street. Camp Street is a more populous street where people are up and down. So I, in my innocence, could not imagine a plot where somebody would go to the big gate of Camp Street prison to try to buy. Every time I'm thinking of this, over all these years, I'm thinking of John Street fence, which runs like that. And all that Gregory Smith and everybody has to say about it. So I want to make that amendment. Now, I discussed crime scene because it would appear that elements of the state and the security forces had some anticipation of some action to take place there. And why do I say that? Because I'm saying that this is the reason that Gregory Smith directed them to go and test the walkie-talkie at that location. But in my mind, I was thinking of the eastern gate and not the western gate. Now, if that is so, then this ties the state in to the crime. Because knowingly or unknowingly, the state had been instructed to arrange a more hospitable scene for anyone going to commit a crime, such as bombing university, to make it more inviting there. Because if you are going to bomb or do anything and you see policemen, any person of average common sense will not go there. That is the question of crimes. Walter Rodney and his role is very important and cognitive. I had read while abroad that the chairman of the commission had asked whether anyone had any of the speeches of Walter Rodney. I found such a speech. As in the interview, he's talking for himself, but in the speech he is talking more freely because he's not answering questions, he's interacting with the crowd. And in that speech, he touched upon this question of violence. He touched upon methods of struggle like mobilization, strike. He didn't talk of a general strike, as I heard from a previous witness, but he talked of strikes. And it was in fact during the strike, it was a speech in which he said the PNC must go and by any means necessary. And it was a speech in which he also weighed with the public the virtues of peaceful struggle and what sometimes he claims regimes push people to violent struggle. Various those things. But he kept repeating, I think it was in the interview, that violence is always regrettable. And I commend those words to the Commission because a person who is saying violence is always regrettable is not going to jump up by any sort of peak and lead people into violence. In fact, leading people into violence with the army, we had several armed forces in Guyana, and I suppose they're still there. Police force, the army, the People's Militia, officially armed forces, the Guyana National Service to some extent, and I have seen pictures, not taken by me or the WPA or hostile people, pictures taken by government photographers working for government press of what are essentially civilian groups carrying arms. So when people try to tell me about the WPA as an armed body and all that, my memory is excited, that's all I can say to the present. Now, Walter Rodney is an educator. In politics, he's an educator. Secondly, Walter Rodney had no power in the WPA or in the country to launch any revolution. We call ourselves revolutionaries. And we all say, if we are fighting a system that we consider to be negative, to be stultifying the population, and most of all, to be taking away rights. We all say something to the effect of, by any means necessary. Any popular organization worth its salt has said that. It does not mean that you're looking forward to blood. I would respectfully say that no one in any party in this country can say that the WPA or any of its known members were ever accused of bloodshed, of murder, or even of wounding anyone. Not even of breaking up a meeting, not of, not any of that kind of stuff at all. We have none of that to our record and have never been accused of it. So, this speech is very important because if I don't know the process by which John, this is my only copy, and I brought it all the way from where I live in the United States of America. It's called The Struggle Goes On. But I think it will be very useful to all sides. And it has things in there that people will like to conceal, especially people on my side of the fence, because it does say that this is what people are sometimes pushed to. But it makes it very clear that this is not by any means a prior consideration. We had not, as one of the oldest political activists, I would say, we had not exhausted the means of struggle. We had not exhausted the means of struggle. I am living in the United States because of something that developed in the village where I lived for over 70 years of my life, in 2002. And this may not be relevant, but it shows the attitude from which I am testifying. I felt that the armed movements of those days were not justified because people had not done their political work. Well, politics is a process. It has to be done and done and done, documented over and over and over again until you come to maturity. The WPA had not come to a stage where it could say it had tried everything. And I don't think anyone in the WPA was of that mind. In fact, it had come to a stage where it had said, violence is totally out of the question. This was a meeting in the home of the late Dr. Joshua Ramsani. Himself, someone on whom an attempt had been made in October 1970, I think, outside of the Cooperative Bank. And he felt gravely ill but recovered. And so, an armed attack with gunfire. No suspect arrested, nothing. Big delegation went up to the Prime Minister of the time, led by UG people and all academics and the county. And he promised full cooperation, but nothing happened.
What year was that, sir?
I think it was October 1970. It's either 70 or 71, but I think it's 70. And subject to verification. So that was the crime scene, and that was the So Dr. Rodney goes into all of this, goes into it in the interview. So that man is trying to show, all we are saying, you are considering violence. That's the point. I am suggesting that considering violence is not a crime. And lawyers know when it becomes a crime. But when it comes to political change, it is normal for people to talk in that strain. What I am urging is that at no point will the Working People's Alliance ever attack a police station. This is where they usually begin. Attack a police station. No such thing in Ghana's political history. Attack a resident, somebody's resident. No such thing to the credit of the Working People's Alliance. And so I'm urging that all suggestion that there was this kind of thing planned, especially imminent, in some near future around that time. It's not a serious suggestion at all. And that European People's Alliance have quite a lot more to do. I think I also saw that the chairman had asked whether Rodney ever had a premonition. I read that in the news, I don't know if it is accurate. But I did come across, and was trying to find some lines in which he had said that if he should fall, the people should use his body as a barricade. And that means police attacks. But what he was saying in this speech, his struggle goes on. He was placing his emphasis on the strength of participation. He said, if only the WPA comes out here and the police come, we are finished. But if you come in your thousands, like tonight, if you keep coming in your thousands, the police will have to think 100 times before breaking up a meeting. That was his point, and he kept hammering it away. He referred also to the killing of Father Dark in that very speech, 20th of July, 1979. Called Father Dark, the first martyr of that stage of the Guyana Revolution. And he went into great detail showing how the Guyana Chronicle had tried to mystify the whole thing, and how they published news of this thing without a single photograph. And they were photographs known to be existing. And I could pause here, Mr. Chairman, and Commissioners, Council, so that I can catch my breath and also try to satisfy any questions that may be coming.
It is already 10 past, and you've given us a great deal of material thus far. I well appreciate it. You may well be getting a little carried at this point, and it's also a convenient point at which to break.
So I requested indicated the names of the attorneys representing the People's National Conference. I think I did mention 3 names.
I remember that, you did mention 3 names, but I think that were all 3 persons up with you then? Is there 2 others?
I think there were only 2 of us, and so I would like to introduce you to the third person, Mr. James Bond.
Mr. James Bond of 007 fame.
I think you do better than that.
You're happy to see him at work. You're happy to extend that into him. So the team now consists of yourself,
Mr. Harmon,
and Mr. Bond.
You did kind of speak.
yes, I was.
But unless there's any other issue, Commission Council and the Council issue with the proper attention, we will break down for days.
Mr. Chairman, there's one further issue that you raised this morning, and that was the use to which the tribunal or the commission would make in respect of the book written by Smith. And what I would say, Mr. Chairman, is that is a very complex legal issue, and I at least would prefer to address that in writing and have you issue a ruling.
Yes, I was looking to it now because it was one which I would invite something, but I'm certainly not expecting you to give a considered response at this stage. But I'll be happy to receive your submissions in writing. But I'm certainly not expected to have that response at this point. So thanks very much indeed.
That at the time that we are addressing you at the end of the day, then we could put our considerations as to what weight should be attached not only to the dismissal, but any other item of documentary evidence that you might possess. But we acknowledge that that's an issue for what weight should be attended to. We could encompass that in our lessons.
Yes, but by the time that the exercise is finished or near finished, we may be able to identify several other pieces of evidence besides our critical. When they begin to which the same question arise. What way? To be answered. But fortunately, that hour has not yet come. But the hour that is at hand is the hour of adjournment. And so we start adjournment until tomorrow morning at 9:30.
Thank you.